A lot of ground to cover after today's explosive testimony in the Alex Murdaugh murder trial. Joining us once again, trial lawyer Carl B. Grant, to talk about some insight and analysis. And Billie, I think we have to start with the video.
Absolutely.
That interrogation, the questioning, whatever you want to call it, when he was sitting inside of that sled vehicle talking to those agents. Let's go ahead and take a look at that right off the top, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
I could see him, and, you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. My boy over there, I could see it was.
Sorry.
And I could see his brain on. And I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You know, I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I mean, I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to take, I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them.
All right, so much to unpack there in terms of his demeanor, but let's just start with the discrepancy, because both sides have tried to use the fact that he was clean to make their case.
Yes.
The defense says there's no way he could have shot them and not had blood all over him, but there's also no way he could have checked the pulse and tried to turn over his son's body and not have had blood somewhere, because one of those investigators testified there's no footprint in the blood, there's no knee print in the blood, there's no handprint anywhere in all of the blood that was on the crime scene. So how do jurors navigate that?
That was the window of opportunity that the prosecution was looking for to rebut the assertion that how could this guy have done so much damage with all of this blood exploding everywhere, yet his T-shirt and clothing are clean. Now the prosecution is going to say, we have somebody who's given a story that doesn't make logical sense. How can you touch someone with all of this blood and not have blood all over you? How can you try to turn them over? How can you check their pulse and not have any blood all over you? So they're going to try to paint the defendant through his testimony, if you will. I know he hadn't taken the witness stand, through his statement.
Right, but these are his own words.
That's right,
yes.
His own words. They're going to try to paint him as a liar because he doesn't have blood all over him. Now, the most important exchange that I saw today was when the prosecution asked, number one, the witness, do you think he changed clothes? And that drew an objection. Proper, because that calls for speculation. The prosecution then came back with, because you can't speculate on the witness stand. The prosecution then came back with, do you think his clothes were laundered? The witness can testify about present sense impressions and things that they observed. If the clothes were laundered, that implies that he had to change clothes. And she said yes, she thought the clothes were laundered. And then the defense came back with the question, what makes you think these clothes were laundered? And it was a powerful response that was very damaging, unfortunately, to the defense. I'm trying to make sure that I'm neutral here.
Understood,
okay?
understood.
But very damaging to the defense, because the answer was because he was sweating and wet, but his clothes appeared to be dry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, by definition, implies something had to happen where there may have been a change of clothes or switch of clothing at some point.
Wow. Yes, and we actually have that soundbite, but that wasn't a powerful exchange happening there. Something else that stood out to me today was the fact that Laura Rutland, who was one of the investigators with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, she described early on that Alex Murdaugh, along with other people that may have been involved, were considered a suspect. Let's take a look at that.
So these are the clothes that that you saw him wearing sitting in the car?
Correct.
And is your testimony those clothes look like they're freshly washed?
He's sweating and they are dry, so I would say yes.
And that was the moment you described, but she also went on to say that it was early on that night that Alex Murdaugh was considered a suspect, if we can pull that clip up as well.
Was Alex Murdaugh, your assisting SLED, night of June the 7th, morning June the 8th, was Alex Murdaugh a suspect?
That night, everybody was a suspect.
Everybody? Can you be more specific? Who else were suspects besides?
Well, there was reasons we were asking certain questions. Who his best friend is, who, you know, their routine each day. There were so many different scenarios it could have been that night. So, in my view, everybody was a suspect at that point.
Including Alex?
Including Alex.
Why would the defense team want to establish that investigators determined early on in the investigation that Alex Murdaugh, the person they're representing and trying to say is innocent, was considered a suspect?
It goes back to the old Johnny Cochran line, a rush to judgment. Rush to judgment. That's what they're trying to show, that they made an elementary decision that Alex was, in fact, the person who committed the crimes, and therefore a rush to judgment. So we consider him a suspect also, but I thought the detective's response was very good. That is, everybody at that point was a suspect. We couldn't rule anybody out. We're still gathering evidence to determine who did what and what the relative responsibilities were.
We know that there will be an ebb and flow in this case. They have recessed for the weekend. We'll resume Monday at 9:30. We have about a minute or so left. Just your overall assessment, because it's clear, you can really see the prosecution building blocks, so to speak. You referred to that several times this week, and so I saw exactly what you meant by that, and we'll see how that picture continues to develop. But your assessment as you rate the job that each team is doing and who's ahead, so to speak.
Well, again, they're all doing good jobs because these are great lawyers. Okay, I know these lawyers; they're all good. And the thing is, when it comes to physical evidence, the question becomes, like I said, either it's there or it's not. Now, the prosecution has established through their witnesses that damaging physical evidence was indeed there. Now, the defense has to establish through their own testimony, through their own experts, either it wasn't there or what you're saying was there is something else. So that's going to be something that will come up. That's why you always tell the jury you got to keep an open mind. The prosecution always goes first, and they put on an avalanche of evidence. But you got to keep an open mind until we get to present our case, assuming we decide to present one.
This is incredible. You know what else makes me wonder? Because we were wondering whether Alex Murdaugh might take the stand, right? We were talking about whether that would be a possibility. And, you know, in some cases, a defense attorney might want to keep their client off the stand, but the fact that we have testimony from him by virtue of these videos, does that put more pressure on them to have him explain his mindset during those moments?
You know, that is going to be a challenging decision. At this point, the defense really would have to think hard as to whether they would put him on the stand. And here's the reason why. They've already played his exculpatory statement. Essentially, he's already testified saying, what, I didn't do it. And so if he's already done that, then you have to decide, really, do you put him on the stand and subject him to cross-examination where things could come out before the jury that could end up convicting him?
Wow. Still a lot to unpack here. We're going to pause right there on that moment, and when we return, we're going to have more insights from trial lawyer Carl B. Grant on the Murdaugh murder trial, day 5. We'll be right back.